the war in the Gulf is entering another phase. Iran just said that they will refuse to negotiate with Donald Trump and U.S. administration anymore, and they intend to wait out Donald Trump's remaining term. So, which means the Strait of Hormuz will be closed until 2028. That is that your expectation? Did you expect the war to just to be a prolonged one?
Absolutely. I wrote a while back, actually, Carl, on my Substack, an article looking at the dynamics between the escalation trap, which is the Robert Pape thesis, together with arguments about, Trump being incentivized to bring a quick end to the war and get out, versus other dynamics at work, which was including the sort of much broader foreign policy posture, I guess, of the American permanent state around the idea of the Greater Israel project. And of course, you add into that the overriding political sensibilities leading into a midterm election and the need for what we call a decent interval, which is a gap between recognizing military defeat and actually doing something about it. And that decent interval problem is the one that manifested itself in Vietnam, when the American administration, people deep inside the administration, actually knew that the United States couldn't win that war, but they couldn't get out either for fear of losing reputation, and et cetera, et cetera. So you bundle all of that together, and the chances of a rapid resolution to this conflict is very, very slim. The other thing to remember is that this is a conflict many decades, not only in the making, but in fact has been on and off for many decades as part of a continual attempt, I guess, to reshape the very nature of the Persian Gulf and the geopolitical arrangements there. And going back 30 years or so, there was a clear American strategic intent to prosecute a clearing strategy to clear out all the obstacles towards being able to lay the groundwork for a greater Israel. And the last major obstacle of that was the Iranian state. And so that project in that sense hasn't ended yet. The fact that the United States has actually suffered what I would say is a strategic defeat. And it's a strategic defeat for the United States because it was not able to achieve any of its core objectives via military means. It actually recognizes that it can't achieve those military objectives. And it's also had its position in the Persian Gulf severely depleted. And in fact, they've been by and large pushed out of the Persian Gulf for the time being. So in all major respects, the United States for now has suffered a strategic defeat. It doesn't mean the end of the war, but it is forcing the Americans to recalibrate. And that's precisely what they're doing. And of course, at the same time, because it is a process that involves more than one actor, the Americans don't get to dictate all the terms. Iran and others are actually recalibrating their own posture towards the conflict that's just been, the current circumstances, and their expectations about what might unfold over not only the next 3 months, but perhaps even, as you imply, the next 3 years.
Yeah, that will have great implication for the global economy because up to now, the Persian Gulf hold about 20% of the world's crude oil production and also about 20% of the world's natural gas production. And as we found out, the modern world runs heavily on products derived from those hydrocarbon products. What do you see going forward? The impact on the global economy will be as the war drags on.
Part of the assessment of what is likely to unfold depends upon how we evaluate, firstly, the aggregate market impact of what's been going on in the Persian Gulf, as well as offsetting moves made elsewhere, particularly in the United States, and to some extent what's going on in Russia. And the ability of economic systems and enterprises around the world to adapt to a world in which there are supply side shocks when it comes to oil, but not just oil in general, but the derivative products that come from it. Because it's the derivative products that ultimately feed their way into different kinds of economic activities. And different kinds of oils from different parts of the world are better suited for the manufacturing or the distilling of particular kinds of usable energy products. I think one of the interesting things that we need to watch very, very closely is actually what's going to happen in the diesel market. Diesel is a product that is manufactured best actually from the crude oil from the Persian Gulf and also from the Urals, the Russian crude variety. It's actually not particularly efficient to get diesel from the crude from the American shale basins. Okay, so the American system is actually perfectly fine for the manufacture of gasoline, but it's actually not well suited to the manufacture of diesel and jet fuel. For that, it actually does need to import oils from other parts of the world, either from the Persian Gulf or some oils that they can blend from places like Canada. Okay, so the thing to watch out for is actually what's going to happen to diesel first and foremost in the United States. Diesel is also going to be an issue for other parts of the world for exactly the same reasons. Okay, so I think it's not just a question of aggregate oil shortages, it's actually very particular kinds of end products where we're going to experience more shortages than not. These products, by the way, go towards activities where the elasticity of demand, the price elasticity of demand, is actually not particularly high, meaning that even as prices go up, these activities, in a sense, have to keep going. You can't just stop using diesel because you don't have any substitutes, and if you stop, you also impair your business. Whereas for many households that use gasoline, they do have the ability to adjust their behaviors so as to save on gasoline, whether it's by working from home, taking public transport, carpooling, etc., or riding a bike or whatever it is. There are substitutes that many households can actually contemplate in the event of rising gasoline prices, which will alleviate some of those pressures. But diesel's a very different story. So globally, diesel exposure will be the main one to watch out for. We also know, and this is probably the last big picture sort of observation about all of this, is that what China does is going to matter a lot. China, over the last 4 months, has demonstrated that its ability to modulate its demand for oil from the global market has played an important role in keeping a lid on price rises. It hasn't stopped price rises, but it's certainly taken a lot of the pressure out of the system. The question will be whether or not China will continue to be either willing or able to do that, and how fast China will be able to adapt its own economic systems and models over the course of the next 6 months to 2 to 3 years that will continue allowing China to reduce the pressure it places onto the global market. So they're the things that I think we need to watch out for. We've already seen some demand destruction, Carl. Right? The world market on the demand side has already responded. There is less economic activity using some of this oil, much from China, but elsewhere as a result of the situation in the Persian Gulf. The other thing to remember is people have a very interesting way of thinking about prices. At the moment, I think the last time I looked earlier this morning, Brent crude was 87, 88, $90 or something a barrel, some around that number. And there's a whole lot of sighs of relief around the place. People saying, "Oh, it's not that high." Well, let's not forget that in January it was about 55, 60. Okay, so it's actually gone up, 40 odd percent. This is not, peanuts. We have this year experienced substantial increase in crude oil prices. That's a fact, right? The fact that we now think that it's not that high, because in our minds we were thinking that maybe this is going to go to 150 or 200. In many ways, that's a trick we play on ourselves. The people running businesses get no relief from the fact that oil prices at $90 is $60 shy of what we might have expected, when it is $35 higher than it was. That's the reality. Prices have increased and enterprises have had to adapt. And some of them have done that, of course, as we've discussed before, through contracting their activities, finding alternatives, etc., etc., and also just slowing down what they do. And others are just having to absorb it and eventually will pass on these costs. So we're going to see some cost pass-ons. The diesel stuff, by the way, just so that people sort of understand how it affects an economy. Diesel and jet fuel is foundational to transportation, moving people and cargo. Diesel is also critical in things like farm machinery and mining machinery. So just have a little bit of a contemplation about what that means for those who are in the business of producing and harvesting agricultural products, and the folk who are in the business of mining products out of the ground. At some point, these costs will feed through into the system.